I'm a real deal. I'll shoot your liver out and hand it to you.
All right, it's late. It's real late. It is 10 o'clock at night. Demetrius and I are joining each other for a nice little Mosconi Cup preview. We have the lineups in order. This is not going to be a full podcast, but we will do a small little preview of the Mosconi Cup. It is too late for Rob, so I'm just joined with Demetrius. Demetrius, what's up?
Not too much. How you doing, Nate?
Living the dream. I am so excited for the Mosconi Cup tomorrow. It's going to be fantastic.
I'll tell you what, man. You've got Thanksgiving. You've got, well, I'm just going to go ahead and say Christmas. Anyway, so you've got winter holiday, and then you've got, and then right in the middle of it, we've got the Mosconi Cup. It's almost a system overload.
It is going to be fantastic. We will do a kind of, I don't know, somewhat weekly podcast. I don't know. We'll do shout-outs. We don't have any introduction things, so we'll just do shout-outs. I'll go first. I'm going to give a shout-out to Sean Tuffner, Tim Clark, Ryan Harmson, Steve Hall, and Marvin Taboda. Hopefully I pronounced that right. These guys have been sharing the podcast more than anybody else. There's been other people that have shared it semi-consistently, but not nearly as consistent as these guys. I want to give a huge shout-out to these guys and just let you guys know that I really appreciate you guys' help with the spreading of the podcast, and I wanted to give you some shout-outs. Of course, you guys are going to have some opportunities to win some really, really, really cool stuff, especially Sean, because he is leading by a landslide right now. So, yep, I wanted to give a shout-out to those guys. And Demetrius, go ahead. I hope you're not talking because you didn't unmute your thing. You're creating editing.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry, I bumped the mute button. Sorry about that.
Creating editing for me. Oh, no. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just going to shout out. You know what? It's non-pool related. I didn't have a shout-out prepared. And just a little something about me, so I'll shout out to J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm reading again through the Lord of the Rings, reading it to my kids, and oh my gosh, there's like two great escapes in my life, and one of them is pool, and the other one is books, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be besides Middle Earth. And so, yep, that's it. I love Middle Earth, and so, but now there's only one thing in the world that's better than Middle Earth, and that is Matchroom. I love Matchroom. These guys are doing a great job for pool, man.
They're creating an event worth watching. I know that. I'm excited for tomorrow. But let's get talking about it, I suppose. Yeah, we have the lineups. Before we go into day one lineups, why don't we do a quick overview? I can take it on first if you'd like.
Go ahead, yeah.
I am, before the Bergman and Corey thing, I kind of thought the U.S. didn't have a huge chance. And this is kind of the way that I look at it. I think that Johan was like the Bill Belichick of coaching. He is the GOAT. He is the greatest of all time. I think that Johan is about as good as you could possibly get for a coach. So I think him alone is worth probably 1.5 points. I think like just the addition of him onto a team is probably going to be worth at the end of it about 1.5 points between preparation, between picking the right lineups, et cetera, et cetera. I think the U.S. lost 1.5 points right then and there just by losing Johan. Now, Jeremy Jones, I think he's a perfectly adequate coach. I don't agree with the choices he made for players necessarily. I think that Chris could be a really good player, and I'm really excited to see him both as a friend and both as a fan to see how he performs out there. But I think over the course of 2 years that Tyler had a 5-3 record. He was a winning player, and I know that he's talked a lot about chemistry, team chemistry, building the team dynamic. Of course, those are things that you can't truly measure. It's really hard to measure either way. But I just think that Tyler would have been a great addition, and I'm not even saying necessarily in the place of Chris. I just think that Tyler's want to and his fervor, I think, would have been a great addition to the team.
Well, let me ask you this question: is it possible? And I really I don't know. I'm asking with Johan. He's not from the U.S., and so he could come in And, he's not friends with any of these guys. It's kind of like, when a corporation hires a guy to come in and just clean house,
Yep.
they bring someone in from
exactly.
outside who just doesn't have any ties with anybody. I mean, Jeremy Jones has been deeply entwined with U.S. Pool for 20 years. He knows all these players. He plays alongside of them. Is it possible that personal relationships and history has either played a role directly with, some type, I'm not trying to accuse him of favoritism, but even just kind of putting it in a spot where, you know what I mean? We've all been on a team where it's I know that guy.
Here,
I don't want to be mean to him.
I'll answer your question really quickly, and then we'll move on. You ready?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So moving on, because I of course
Okay.
I know what kind of what happened, but it's not probably for the podcast, but.
Fair enough.
Yeah, unfortunately. So I think that Jeremy Jones, I don't necessarily think. I think for the ability of coaching / the decisions he's made, I think he's about a wash, give or take. Now on the other side of the pond, I think Marcus Schmatt, for whatever you want to say about him, was a pretty terrible coach. And I think he was a terrible coach, not because he was truly trying to be a coach, because to be fair to him, I don't think he was ever really trying to be of course, he made the decisions. He picked the players he needed to pick. But I don't think he cared to be a coach as much as he cared to be, as respectfully as I can say this, a mascot. He kind of sat over in his corner with his Napoleon hat on, and he kind of, I don't want to say he was playing the jester role, but he was having fun. I mean, his teams were so good. They were so dominating. He didn't really have to coach. And the first year that they lost, I think it was a little bit of a shock, and it's just like, what the heck just happened? And then the second year he lost, he was clearly outcoached, I think, by Johan, and his little antics they're really funny. I mean, they're actually, as being in the arena and seeing the stuff that he does, it's really funny. But it's only really funny if you're winning. And when you're not winning, that stuff gets old really fast, especially when you're trying to have a competitive event. So I think the act of not even really trying to be a coach and then bringing in who I think, if you want to talk about like the Bill Belichick, this is like the Andy Reid of like the next coach. I mean, he is the next best thing to a coach in Alex Lely. He is a lot like Johan. I mean, they grew up together. It's actually kind of crazy to think out of the same pool hall in the Netherlands, Alex Lely, Niels Fine, and Johan Reusink made it out of the same pool room. How crazy is that in a small town in the Netherlands? But
it is cool. And one thing about it is with the style, like you're saying, I don't know that Marcus Schmatt's kind of like party style. And I know it's, maybe Matchroom plays it up and they tell him not to be so serious and, to kind of, but I'll tell you what, I think that when I look at the European lineup nowadays, they really seem, Europe, when I think of like European pool players, I think of like players that take pool really, really seriously. They train hard, they work hard, they compete hard, they prepare hard, and so like kind of a party mindset. Like maybe when the European team, when you had like Mika Immonen on there and like guys that were kind of like maybe not to say that they've ever really been too different, but you've always had Ralph Souquet and Niels has always been a workhorse. But I feel like when you look at like Gorst and Kachi and Ocean, it's like it just doesn't really. It's like Alex Lely seems like a really good fit. That's all.
I agree for sure. I think he's going to be fantastic. I think him alone, from going to not really having a coach to having probably, in my opinion, the second best coach of all time. Or I'm a young guy. I'm not super, I guess, plugged into the way that it used to be back in the 90s and early 2000s really, but coaching wasn't nearly as important then as it is now. In fact, there was a lot of player coaches, and that was even when they even had a coach. So I'm just gonna make a claim. If you want to argue with me, go ahead. I'll forfeit the win to you, whoever you choose. But I'm gonna say he's the second best, and I think it's by a little ways. And then I think, like you said, the discipline that Alex Lely brings and the seriousness. Jeremy Jones, for whatever you want to say about his intelligence to the game and the things that he can teach the players, he doesn't seem to require quite as much discipline from his players from what I've seen. And maybe it's a little unfair to say. It probably is very unfair to say that because it's 2020 and it's really weird to probably try to coach through Zoom. And I don't know how it went, and we probably don't know as much as we do. But I'm just, I'll throw that out there just to be fair. But I think Alex Lely, I think that's a big upgrade in coach over Marcus, and I think the drop off from Johan to Jeremy Jones it's probably a decent amount. So I'm going to say that it's 1.5 points just losing Johan, and it's 1.5 points the addition of Alex Lely. That's a 3-point swing in total. That makes an 11-8 win for the U.S., now an 11-8 deficit. Before we even talk about players, now we can talk about players. I think the loss of, even with Justin Bergman still in there, the addition of Alvin and the addition of Fedor, oh my goodness gracious, you are talking about two of the most hottest players in the world right now, and they're playing great pool, and it's just a huge addition. Even if you bring back the same team from last year, I think just the addition of those two players is probably worth a point in itself. Probably actually about 1.5 points each. Just because you're replacing Alex and Niels, who really struggled last year. I have to assume Joshua's going to continue playing his game. Jason's going to play his game, and Eklanti's going to play his game. So I think probably 1 point for each player that they're going to win on top of that. So that brings it from an 11-8 to 11-6. And then you throw in there the fact that Corey's coming in, and even in the press conference, he was talking about how, well, luckily I was playing a little bit, and he doesn't sound like he was super full of confidence. I think just the addition of Corey probably minuses you off another point right then and there. That makes it 11-5. And now we bring in the wild card of Chris. If Chris comes out and plays well, maybe if he plays really good, he could be a 2-point swing either way. Or, well, I should say his play could be as much as a 2-point swing either way. He plays really good. I think the U.S. can get 2 more points out of it. He plays poorly. I think it could be another 2-point loss just because he's so unproven. He's so unseasoned. We don't really know. He could be a Tyler Steyer where he comes out and goes 4-2, or he could, be a couple of the other rookies we had back in the day, even with Sky and Justin and Billy. In their rookie campaigns, they struggled mightily. So, it's we don't really know. It could be an 11-3 or it could be an 11-7, but I just don't see a situation where the U.S. makes up all those points that I see as being really big losses, even with the Mullets. The Mullets might be worth 5 points, though.
Well, and before we go any further, just in case that people don't know, why don't we read through who is actually on the team for Europe and the USA?
I suppose we probably should have done that in the beginning. We have to assume everybody knows at this point, but if you don't, that's a great idea. On Team Europe, there is Jason, the current world champion, Fedor Gorsh. We'll start there. Then Jason Shaw was picked second. Joshua Filler was picked third. Albin Ocean was picked fourth. And Eklanti Kachi was picked fifth. So you have 2 820-plus players, 2 more 810 Fargo Plus players, and then I think the lowest player on their team is Albin. I want to say he's an 802. So you have 5 800-plus Fargo players. On Team USA, you have who was picked first? I suppose it was Sky. Sky was picked first, and then Shane. No, Justin was picked first. Sorry, Justin was picked first, and then Sky, and then Shane, and then Billy, and then the big shakeup was Chris Robinson. Of course, we all knew, well, I guess maybe you don't know at this point, but Justin Bergman was replaced by Corey Deuel after testing positive for the coronavirus, and he was unable to get on a flight over to the UK. So Corey Deuel now takes his place. I think we have Shane as an 820 player, and I think Sky is about a 796 or 798, somewhere in that range. We have Billy Thorpe at about a 775, I believe, is about where he's at these days, 770, 775, somewhere in there. We have Chris Robinson, I believe, is about a 750, and I believe Corey Deuel is about a 770. So I think what it comes down to,
roughly.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is I think the average was about 770 for the U.S., and Europe, it was about 812, I believe, is what it was, the average.
Yeah, and so before we even talk about motivation and coaching and morale, just the skill difference.
Of course the argument comes back to, it's a race to 5, it's a total coin flip, and it's true to a point, right? So it's like you're at the Kentucky Derby, and you can either have Seabiscuit or you can have some random horse, but instead of it being a quarter mile, it's now only a 32nd of a mile, and that's fine. I'd still rather have the better horse, right? At the end of the day, this
is a race. The problem is that this is a race. It's not a race to 5. it's a race to 11, races to 5. And so let's put it this way. If you had a player with a 40 Fargo point difference and you had to play a race to 11, races to 5, that's the player that's 40 points lower has almost no chance. Now, they have a lot of chances to win each individual race. So you could say, it's a coin flip on each individual race. But if you've got, I would say that a 40-point difference means probably a 60-40. Like, I think that, they probably win 60% of those races. So it's like, it's in each set, they're very, very, very live. But if you're 60-40 underdog and you're going to play a race to 11, and I don't have the statistical, you're the math guy. You know what I mean? And we don't need to work through it. But my point is that if you're a 40-60 underdog and it's a race to 11 points, I mean, you might be like less than 5% to win out, the match.
And of course, to play devil's advocate, of course, you can say, well, they were the same kind of underdogs the last 2 years and they won, and that is true, and it's hard to refute that. But what I would say is, for anybody out there that's like a scientist or maybe an engineer or something like that, there are things in data that's extremely hard to model, and depending on what area you're in, you kind of refer to that as noise. And noise basically just means what level of randomness is there to a data set that you can kind of try to model by using just different modeling techniques. And of course, anybody out there that uses different types of data probably is like, well, you're an idiot. That's not true. But for more or less, it kind of is. So the idea of having a crowd and having somebody screaming out on your backswing, Sky's Mom's got it going on, which happened a lot when we were in London. That's really hard to shoot through, right? And if you go back and watch, there's probably 2, maybe 3 or 4 times where Sky actually stands up, looks at the referee, and he's like, "Come on, that's what am I supposed to do with this?" And the ref will reset the clock and issue a verbal warning, whatever, to the fan. And there was a couple fans that got kicked out because they couldn't shut up. The idea is that's really hard to model. That's really hard to. How do you know which drunk fan is going to say something into which player? How many times last year did you see Joshua Filler miss a shot, or even be down on a shot, and somebody would scream out, "Get at him, Niels," something like that. Basically, trying to take a dig at the way that Niels performed last year, unfairly, I think, but he struggled a little bit. But the idea is you can never truly model a drunk idiot fan. That's really hard to play through sometimes, and it's really hard to predict things that are going to happen through there. And I think that's part of the things that aren't going to be there. So now, Demetrius, I've been talking quite a bit, so let me prompt this question to you, because I wanted to get to this at some point in time. Now seems like the perfect time. When you have a crowd in there, there's a lot of randomness. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen because, like I said, you don't know which drunk idiot's going to say something stupid and to which player. So not having a crowd there, do you think it makes it easier to play as the players or harder because the ambience of a roaring crowd kind of helps you block out all the small things?
I think that I think that it makes a very I think that it's going to help Europe. I think that the reason why is because, when we were talking about statistics, you're like, well, they won last year. So here's, it kind of the best way I can answer that is the reason I think that having no audience helps Europe is because when you think of what has to happen for the U.S. to win, and what has to happen is that those matches have to stop being 60-40 underdogs and they have to go to 50-50 or becoming a favorite. And so how does that happen? Well, how if you're a 40-point underdog or how if you're the underdog could that change? And the answer is, there is some variance and there is some things along the lines of momentum and energy. And so if for whatever reason, everyone that's played team pool understands. Like if your team gets into the right gear where people are coming with hero shots and you're high fiving and you're winning the key hill racks and making the jump shot of the hill and then you shoot and slop in the 9-ball and some kick shot and a couple things go your way and your team starts running away and then meanwhile they're making a couple mistakes and they start getting frustrated and you can't count it. Europe can't count on their team. Like 40 points is close enough to where if the momentum goes the U.S.'s way, if they felt like they were out of the match and all of a sudden they get back into the match, and that could mean either U.S. gets an early lead and some things go their way, or maybe Europe gets an early lead and all of a sudden USA, somehow finds their way back into it with a few hero shots, that can turn it around. And so through some momentum and some short-term outcomes on the sets, and then at the same time, I think the fan energy lends itself to like crazy amounts of pressure that maybe Europe could break down at times, or maybe it could inspire U.S. to dig really deep at times. So I just think that pressure and the crowd participation adds some wild card factor, and I think that the wild card is like, I think that the U.S. really needs something to go weird, and so the more variables they can throw in there that can mix it up would be better. And I think the calmer atmosphere is just going to make it less likely for anything crazy to happen. And if something crazy doesn't happen, it just doesn't look good for U.S. That's kind of what I think.
Yeah, I that's basically the exact way I look at it. I kind of look at it as like you have a room full of balls, like the little play pit balls at like a McDonald's, and they kind of just sit there nicely until you allow 2,000 dogs into the room, and the next thing you know, there's balls flying all over the place, and you can't even keep track of what's going on. And I kind of look at that a little bit as like the fans at the Mosconi Cup. You don't really know what the heck's going to happen. You just know that there's going to be chaos everywhere. And when you have just a ball pit with no dogs in it, or maybe just a few, it's very easy to follow what's happening, and it's really hard to predict it. More or less, my point is, I think the fans really add a lot of chaos that's really hard to plan for and really hard to prepare for as a player. So I agree with you entirely. I think it favors Europe big time because I think it brings it back down to just who's the better player. If these players all played, so we're going to get to this in a little bit, but if like the first singles match, Atlanti Caci versus Chris Robinson, they played first round in the U.S. Open, even if it was a race to 5, who in the world is going to take Chris Robinson? I mean, Chris is a very, very, very good player, but there are levels to this, and Atlanti Caci might be the best player in the world right now, and if he's not, it's pretty hard to make a list where a list of top 5 players and not put him on there. He is hitting the balls really good right now. Chris,
I'll tell you what. Interesting. I'm sorry, we don't have time for this, but I'd love to. Like, it would be fun to watch like a Atlanti Caci play Shane in a 9-ball in the spot, 9-ball race.
I agree. Even 10-ball, I would love to see it.
Well, 10-ball.
10-ball on tight pockets. I should
we
say.
don't need to
10-ball
talk
on 10
about
pockets. Yeah.
But I just think that the 9-ball with a 9 of the spot. I mean, boy, Clenty's about as tough as anybody I've ever seen.
Yeah, it'd be great. But so we kind of broached that one. We talked about that one a little bit. So I guess I gave my prediction. I think it's going to be. I think the U.S. loses 1.5 points for losing Johan. They lose 1.5 points by Team Europe gaining Alex Lely. I think they lose about 1 point for Alvin and about 1 point for the addition of Fedor. And I think that they probably Chris Robinson is a wild card. So I guess without talking Chris, I think the Team Europe is gaining 8 points off of Team USA. So it goes from an 11-8 win for the Team USA, and it flips it all the way around to being a 11-6 loss for the. Is that right? That's 8 points. So
yeah, and I think that the loss of Bergman hurts the U.S. too. If you're on Team U.S. If you're on Team U.S., I mean, it doesn't just hurt technically; it also hurts, in terms of morale. Like, it's just got to be like you just got to be like, because there's got to be a sense of dread. Like U.S. Okay, like
they're up against
now.
It,
I'm going to go into total. I'm going to go into total projection mode. I don't know how these guys are feeling, but I'll tell you how it seems like. It seems like there's just this impending sense of doom on the U.S. where Shane is already kind of like, well. He's everyone's got to kind of start detaching from the results a little bit, and like, we're going to try really, really hard to win, but if it starts going south, I can't be too emotionally invested in this because it's going to hurt too much, and this is going to be ugly. And so Shane, sometimes in the Mosconi Cup, he's kind of like distanced it a little bit, like yeah, that's the U.S. I play, they can play me singles, but they can pick on me when I'm on a team, but I'll play them singles. Shane can always kind of refer to like I've proven I'm not the weak link, and Chris Robinson can be out there like, well, the team may go down in flames, but this is still my first year, my debut, and I want to just play good for me. And then Corey Deuel can be out there, just be like, who knows what, and who knows, it's just a sense of dread and building in. It just seems like. It seems like this might be like the Beatles recording, the Let It Be album, where it's like, Yoko's in the studio and we're going to go through and we're going to finish this thing up and kind of hit the road. You know what I mean? It's like, it just seems like the band is about to break up and it's just hanging by a thread. So just given the sense of doom that's going on, doom and gloom and kind of the low morale and just kind of the futility they got to be feeling. And then meanwhile, it's not like Europe's going to get careless. Well, like they've lost the last two. They're very hungry. Yeah, and this is their first opportunity to compete. So it's like it really, gosh, man, this is going to be.
I get that, but let me push back on you on the U.S. side because, Chris is a quiet guy, Corey's a quiet guy, and Shane are quiet guys. And but the two people that aren't are Sky and Billy, of course, and they're bouncing off the walls like crazy. I think maybe we're projecting our feelings maybe a little bit onto what the players probably should be feeling, because the players, I think that they have all the confidence in the world, at least from what I'm seeing from Billy and Sky, and the other three players aren't going to give us much, whether it's good times or bad times. So it's hard to tell.
But there's a difference between like a pep talk, superficial rah rah, and like a deep seated confidence and belief. And I'm not disputing that they have a lot of rah rah. I'm just wondering how deep it runs, and when they get there and things start getting shut down. Like if I had to make a prediction, if you were asking about score predictions, like what I think is going to happen is that Europe, like U.S. against Europe, it's going to be like in a Superman movie where they try to punch Superman in the stomach and break their hand, and Europe is going to go up like 7-1 or 7-2, and then at that point, U.S. is probably going to get their market share because then they're going to go into give up stroke and just start freewheeling and fight for every point and just kind of like, hey, I just want to play and hit balls. And I mean, I can see them getting a 5 or 6, but I think it's more likely they end up at 2 or like I think it's more likely the U.S. gets held to 3 than that they get past 7.
Yeah, I'm there too. I think I guess finishing out where I was before, I think they lose 8 points from the coach, the 3 points from the coach swap, 2 points for the additional players for the Europe, and then I think they lose probably 1.5 points or 2 points for Corey, just because I don't think he's coming in prepared. Regardless of what he says in the press conference today, he kind of acted like he wasn't, but he kind of was, but he wasn't. I think the U.S. is somewhere between. Like if I put the over, I would personally put the over under at about 4.5, and that's probably pretty disrespectful. I think the wild card, like I said, is Chris. If Chris comes out and plays well, I think the U.S. can get to 7. If Chris struggles a little bit, I think it could be an 11-3. I think it's going to be tough. So, but let's go into a situation because I do want to talk about this as well. There is a situation that happened, I guess, in the press conference today, where if Europe does falter, where would it be? And I would say it's in the managing the egos part of it. Jason Shaw. The dude is a huge talent. The dude's got an ego through the roof. Rightfully, well, I don't want to say. I don't know about rightfully so. I mean, the dude is an absolute champion. He is an absolute champion. And the same goes for Eklanti Kachi. Ego through the roof. Maybe rightfully so. The dude's an absolute champion. And the same with Joshua Filler. There is a huge amount of ego / confidence, whatever you want to call it. It kind of borders differently from there. I think Eklanti is definitely ego. With what he said in the conference today, he said, "I don't really care how we did last year. I know that I played well and I performed well, so that's good enough for me." And I think when you have a dynamic like that, if
that's I didn't know about that. I'll tell you, that's kind of unpleasant, and that's even if you feel that way, that's not what you say in a press conference right before your match.
I think the U.S., and we're going to talk about the schedule here in just a second. I think the U.S. could come out and punch them in the mouth, pull an upset, and maybe the first two. Of course, the Team Europe and the Team USA, it's always going to favor the better team, quote unquote. I think the second one is Filler and Gorst, Shane and Deuel. I think that's a pretty good I mean, at least on paper, it's a favoring Filler and Gorst for sure. I think you have two of the hottest players in the world right now. Eklunti Kachi and Chris Robinson. Of course, like I said, Chris is going to be a wild card. He could come out and shock the world, and it wouldn't surprise me all that much. The dude's got the heart of a lion. I love his game. I love his fire. But if the U.S. could come out and take those three and kind of punch Europe in the mouth, I think that especially since Eklunti Kachi is losing that third match, I could see some of those egos start getting a little bit strained, and I could see some infighting that Alex would have to then rein in, straighten out, and come back into day two. If he's able to do it, which I think he probably would be able to, I think he's a good enough coach to be able to do that pretty easily. I think they're going to be okay. If he's not able to do it and there's a lot of infighting, the team falls apart, I think those doubles matches are going to be real tough to win for Europe at that point in time. And I think the U.S. could sneak out with a 3-0 lead and being able to take most of the doubles matches. I could see that happening. That's kind of how I see the U.S. being able to win. If the U.S. comes out and loses the first three matches, I don't see a possible way they could come back and win it from there. I just don't see it.
It's really interesting because, like I said, I mean, it's really the U.S.'s road involves a lot of positive energy and momentum, and a little bit of dissension in the European ranks, like you're talking about, and you know when they start feeling like, you know, and to be fair, they might have some pressure on them just because of such heavy favorites they are, you know, in terms of expectation, you know, so when Kachi is out there and he's playing Chris, and everyone's just like, well, you're supposed to win this. And, you know, and Chris is up there and nobody expects anything from him. I mean, you never know. It's like it can kind of create some weird pressures, and it could but here's the thing. That's true. Everything you said is true, but these guys are champions for a reason. And part of being a champion is that you're prepared. Like you don't, you know, like in the shows that we watch, you know, we watch a lot of movies like Karate Kid, where it's like the good guy is the underdog and the bad guy is like this really overconfident person that once things start going wrong, like they're like, oh, I don't know, and then the good guy wins. Like these are not movie bad guys. These are champions, and it's like to think that they have never been down 3 points before and faced, you know, momentum from their opposition. It's like, I just don't think that, like, I think that in their preparation and with Alex Laley, like somewhere somebody raised their hand in the last year and suggested, hey, how would we respond if the U.S. got some positive momentum and won the first few sets? And it's like, I don't think that they're just like, oh, we never thought of that. I think we're all just going to start fighting and fall apart. Like, I think they're prepared. Like, I really do think that they've considered that possibility that, you know, as a champion, you try to win quick and build up an early lead and never look back, but you also prepare for being down and having things going south on your team and having the opponents have momentum and picturing that spot and then thinking about how you want to respond to that and training and preparing to respond to that. Because I know that I'll just speak for myself. When I go play a match, I always prepare for being behind and for playing bad and for having low confidence and for doubting in my game and for struggling and having weird things go wrong that I normally am able to count on and not having all my tools working and facing a lot of doubts and fears and facing an opponent who's playing over their head and feeling a lot of pressure, weird things that I never even considered. Because the way I look at it is that's what I prepare for, and I have a plan like to how I'm going to manage through that. Because if I show up and I hit dead stroke and my opponent falls apart, everything goes my way, like I'll deal with that. Like I'm okay, like that's fine. Then I don't need to plan for that. You know what I mean? And so I'm always preparing for that adversity. And I just can't imagine that like multiple world champions on that team, that it's going to catch them that far off guard if we happen to win a race to 5. I just don't see that rattling them that deep.
Well, I think that's a funny thing that you just said, because the question was asked to Alvin today. What do you see as the biggest difference between Team USA and Team Europe? And were you able to watch that at all?
No. You know what? You should have said skill.
Well,
I'm not saying that's funny, true, right? But that would have been really inflammatory. I'm not saying that's true.
Anybody who watched this, you know the response. His response was better than that. I actually was able to partake in it today, which was awesome. I got to be one of 4 media members that were in it. But humble brag aside, Albin's response was a world champion. And it's true. And it's true, right? The U.S. does not have a world champion. Not a single one of those players are a world champion.
And just in case anyone's living under a rock, the reason why that's such a direct shot at Shane is because Shane, so there's been like this, every time somebody mentions Shane on AZ Billiards, for example, there's a 50-page thread that bursts out where half the people are going to the death that Shane is the greatest player of all time, and other half the people are saying he's never won a world championship, which is true. He's won world 10 ball events but it's never like a certified world championship. He took back-to-back seconds. Yeah, he took back-to-back seconds, and he's won like 5 U.S. Opens and every other major title, and he's the player of the decade. And he's like, nobody could beat him for money for 10 years. But so the Shane fans, so the Shane haters are like, he's not the greatest ever. He hasn't won a world championship. Earl was better. Shane's good, but he has a lot to prove. Whereas the Shane fans are like, no, you know what? It's the world championships today are totally different than they were 30 years ago, and you can't win them because there's too many good players and single limb and they're lotteries, and you got to look at overall winnings and career, and Shane's the best. And so there's this huge thing about whether or not Shane has achieved greatest of all time status, and the haters all hinge their arguments on the fact that Shane hasn't won a world championship. And so for him to make that comment, that's why that's so funny. It's not just like, oh yeah, we have a world champion. He's directly taking a shot that he's directly taking a shot at the U.S.'s best player. That's what
every
makes that
single
funny.
player. I think every single European player is a world champion. I think every one of them.
Oh, not Clenty, is he? I don't think Clenty is.
Maybe a Clanty's not. But he was a world. Well, I guess so was Shane. Shane was a world number one for probably 5 years, at least.
Filler, Gorst, all these
Jason
guys. I mean,
and Alvin. Yeah, they were all world champions.
That's really funny.
Yeah, that's a brutal one. All right, so
he had that one under his hat for 2 months. The hardest part of that was him acting like he was just coming up with it. He had just had to it's like one of those things where he's just waiting to be asked that question. He was probably smiling when the question was being asked because he was like, I got to play it cool.
Yeah,
anyway.
that's probably too good to just come up with on the spot. I mean, if it is, it's genius. I mean, it's a total woof.
He had that thing pre-packed. And that just goes to, so when I was talking about Europe's preparation, that just goes to show they were preparing if they prepare for the match half as well as they prepare for the press conferences, I don't think a three set lead is going to derail them.
So what you kind of said there with the Shane haters and the Shane lovers, I probably should have said this at the beginning because I thought about it and I'm like, I should probably say this, maybe I shouldn't, and then I just completely forgot about it. But these are our predictions, and whenever we start talking about Team USA stuff, you get these hate mails like, well, you're not patriotic, you're not, you don't love your country. Our job is not to be America lovers here. Our job is to call it like we see it and call balls and strikes and give you guys analysis. I just don't want all the hate mail saying, well, you guys don't care about the U.S. Keep it to yourself. Our job is not to stroke your American flag ego. It's to call balls and strikes. So I just wanted to get that out there. Disagree with us. Give us reasons why. We would love to hear what you guys have to say. But
or offer to bet. Offer to bet on
or
US.
Offer to bet. Yeah, right. But,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
okay.
But yeah. I mean, give us reasons why we're wrong. But don't just say that we're wrong because America. Like, I don't want to hear that argument.
And to just kind of elaborate, I mean, there's a big difference between hating on somebody and calling a match. So, like, for example, I wouldn't match up with anybody on the U.S. team. Every one of those players is a Stone champion. I actually am in the camp of thinking that Shane is the greatest of all time. And when you look at Clenty, Filler, Alvin, and Kachi, I look at all four of them and think that a huge part of their game today has been influenced by what Shane was doing in 2007 to 2010 when those guys were all 10 years old hitting balls. So, like, we're 12 years old. So I think I am a huge fan of Shane. For him to come out of the U.S. pool and dominate the way he did from 2007 to 2017. And you guys know that because I've bet on Shane every time he's ever played for 15 years. Meanwhile, I think what the U.S. has done over the last couple of years is phenomenal in terms of how they put their team together. I really am proud of Billy and Sky and the fact that like I was saying, like Chip Compton and Joey Gray had been kind of playing in some tournaments and then they kind of like stopped competing, whereas Billy and Sky, they kept playing internationally and they've kept going to all the tournaments and they've played their way to where, Sky is knocking on the door of 800 and he's put himself in the top, 20, 30 in the world. And he's, I'm proud of these guys and they play great. And so it's a tale where, the U.S. was kind of like the champs for so long, almost by default, and then Europe came along, and the Philippines and Asia, they came along and started passing us, and Sky and Billy and even Chris and Tyler, these guys are the generation saying, hey, no, we're not prepared to just sit back and let the U.S. fade from the pool scene. We're going to rally. We're going to try to learn, and we're going to evolve and play a different style. And now you got. These guys are playing a different quality pool than any of our players have for a while. So I'm proud of them, and I'm rooting for them. That being said,
I absolutely
Europe is just completely the skills that we've got on that team. Europe is just a higher level. That's all.
Woof. It's good. Yeah. All right. So I wanted to get that in there. Disagree with us if you want. We'd love to hear why we are wrong. Feel free to reach out to us and let us know, or start a page on our, or start a thread on the Queued Up discussion page, or the Queued Up discussion group, I should say. Start a thread. Tell us why we're wrong. We would love to hear why you're wrong. I just don't want to hear we're wrong because America, or because mullets. Although mullets would be, that's fine. Whatever. There's something special to those apparently. So all right, let's actually look at day one, because of course the lineups are out, and the first match, as always, is the ceremonial Team USA versus Team Europe. Number 2 is Joshua Filler. I already said this earlier. Joshua Filler and Fedor Gorst versus Shane Van Boening and Corey Deuel. The third match is Atlanti Kachi and Chris Robinson. The fourth match is Jason Shaw and Alvin Ocean versus Sky Woodward and Billy Thorpe. And the last match of the day is Alvin Ocean versus Shane Van Boening. So let's take it one by one. Of course, I got to give the nod to Team Europe. Like I said this entire time, I think there's just too much talent on one team to be able to, be overcome by Team Europe. Team USA. So I got to give the first point to Team Europe with the team. What do you think?
Agreed.
All right, so we both got 1-1. Filler Gorst, Shane Van Boening, and Corey Deuel. If it was Shane and Sky, I would think differently. Filler Gorst, I think it's probably their best combination of players here of all of Europe. I think maybe you can make an argument for Filler and Jason just because they are such good friends. But, I really think that these two kids right here are shooting the balls probably straighter than anybody else in the world. Maybe short of Atlanti Kachi, because I really do think he's hitting the balls great. I give the nod to Filler and Gorst again.
It's tough, man, because I really think that Van Boening and Corey Deuel make a really good team. And if they were, like you said, if they're playing basically anybody else in the world Scotch doubles, I feel like they can get there. But you're just talking. So I think that's maybe the second or third best Scotch doubles team in the world. It just so happens they're playing the best. So
yeah,
small nod to Europe on that one.
Yeah. All right, so 2-0-2-0. We both have Atlanti Kachi, Chris Robinson. I've been saying this whole time, Chris Robinson's the wild card. Wild card is somebody, he could come out and win this match, and I don't think it would surprise me that much, especially if it's close. If he comes out and just whitewashes Atlanti, I think that'd be a little bit of a surprise. But I can't.
Clenty, didn't Clenty struggle with the time clocks and into a format here a couple of years ago, but then he played better last year? Is that kind of the story?
Especially in singles, he beat Tyler twice last year in the singles. I give the nod to Atlanti, unfortunately.
Okay, we'll just go one by one for now. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
And then the next one's interesting, right? Shaw and Ocean versus Woodward and Thorpe.
Let me wrap this up here. If there's one match that I would love to see more than anything else in the world, I would love to see Chris Robinson win this match. Kind of just because of the comment that Atlanti made. Plus, Chris, I would consider Chris a friend. I think he's great for the game of pool. His parents are amazing. I got to meet them last year at the Mosconi Cup. Tara and Jared. They're really, really good people. Chris is great for the game. I really want to see Chris have a lot of success here. I'm rooting for Chris.
In terms of which match would provide the U.S. the most momentum, I can't help but think that if Chris Robinson, who on paper anyway is our weakest player, although there's debate, but anyway,
but I don't agree with that.
On paper, he is. Yeah. But if he comes out with a win against one of the European champs, it's like that would probably do more to rally the U.S. Whereas even if the U.S. won, Shane and Corey, if Chris got up and just played it effectively, it would really make the U.S. feel like, man, even when we have our best players rally together and eke out a point, how are we going to shore up the law, the skill deficits with Chris or with some of these other guys? It's going to really be tough. Like, there's a lot of pressure on Chris for that reason. In some ways, you could say there's not as much pressure because there's so low expectations. But if he gets up and he's helpless, the U.S. might feel helpless. But if he gets up and plays great and upsets Kachi, that could not only secure a point, but it could really give the U.S. a lot of hope. And so I feel like that'd be a big match to win, and it's going to be a fun one to watch.
Yep, I agree. So I guess we can move on to do. Well, I guess we got Jason Shaw, Alvin Ocean versus Sky Woodward and Billy Thorpe. I'm going to take I'm not going to take a cop out, but I wish I could, because I think that the U.S. will win one of these last two matches. I think they're both coin flips, and because they're both coin flips, I would say the U.S. wins one, the U.S. loses one. I don't know which ones it's going to be. Of course, Sky and Billy, they have some magic together. They're great, great, great friends. I don't know if they're best friends, but they're really good friends. They have great chemistry together. Jason Shaw and Alvin Ocean. I mean, Alvin Ocean hasn't missed a ball in the Mosconi Cup since probably 1916.
That man is amazing.
It's just
I mean, it's really. I'll tell you what. I know that this doesn't back up statistically, but I am a bigger fan of Alvin's game than I am of Jason's game. That's it.
Yeah, I think that. I think that Alvin he's just rock solid. He's just
and maybe if you
solid.
played a race to 100 or something. I mean, and maybe if you had to pick a player that was like had enough fire to like catch a gear and go through a tournament. If you had to pick somebody to win a tournament or pick somebody in a race to 100, Jason has a lot of fire and he catches these really high gears. But if you just wanted to talk about a guy where you're going to play one race to 5 and who's going to be like
with
the
your
highest
life on
average
the line.
performance, Alvin's like a robot, man. That guy is really solid.
Yeah, if I had my life on the line and I had to pick one person to play it for me, it might be Alvin, just because the dude is he's just so cool, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, again,
hard.
with Billy and Sky, it's just like, gosh, man, they're good, but you're right. It's like the U.S. is going to win a match, but here's the thing. I mean, I'm sorry, I'll just gotta say it. I think Europe's a favorite in every one of these matches, and yes, the U.S. will win one or two, but it's not because they're the favorite on any one of these matches going in. I don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah, I would say I think that Billy and Sky win, but I think the second one, I think if Shane was playing Atlanti or Jason, I think he wins. I think Alvin or Joshua, for whatever reason, I just think he loses those, and I think he probably beats Fedor as well. But I think Alvin and Joshua are like the worst singles matchups for him. So I'm going to say that Shane loses this one, but I hate saying it because, of course, I don't want the U.S. to lose. But I'm calling it. I'm
going to say that Shane wins, and here's why. I think that the U.S. finishes at either 1 or 2 points. I think Shane wins his last match, and if Skyler and Thorpe win, then Shane gets pumped up and he wins the second match. And if they lose and they're down 4-0, I think he gets fired up and wins that match. I think we're going to see a very motivated Shane at the last round. I think it's wise to put him up last for the day, because if you put him in first, he could have some jitters. He might not settle in. But if you let him get settled in with those other matches and get in the spirit of things, he's either going to be, of course there's the chance that he's just totally kind of like mortified, dejected, and dispirited. But I really think that it's not on day one. Like, they might get dispirited on day 2 or 3, but like, I don't think that the focus and determination is going to wear off by day 1. I think we're going to see a really determined Shane in that match.
I think it's a late day.
And so I think he's going to win, and I think that they're going to go. U.S. will be down either 3-2 or 4-1, depending on if Billy and Sky can eke out that match.
Yeah, I think it's like an end of day 2. If Europe comes out and gets like a 7-1 lead or something like that, I think the U.S. I don't want to say they'll give up, but it's just really mentally hard to grind and battle in that. That's really tough. So I'll
tell you what, if Shane doesn't win, if Shane, I'll tell you, I was talking about how I like to spirit them if Chris played poorly, but if Shane plays poorly, then that's going to be really hard. Like, that's the problem, man. It's like all the eggs are kind of in Shane's basket, where if he plays poorly, like, everyone's just like, ugh.
It's almost like we're going back to 2015, where the U.S. is just getting ramrodded every single year, and Shane is expected to be everything to the team. And I don't know that we're exactly at that point, because Sky has really stepped up to be a special player the last few years. And Billy is rounding his game around, not even in the Mosconi Cup, but just in general. I think he's really coming into his own as being a top not a world quality player, but certainly that second tier of like right behind. They can knock off any of the top players at any given time, and nobody would bat an eye. But maybe not going to be there consistently. I think Billy was rounding into that really nicely once the shutdown hit. So. Yeah, I think 4-1. The U.S. goes down into day 2. It sounds like you're making that prediction too, 4-1.
I like that scoreline. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, well, I mean, it is what it is. We got to call balls and strikes like we see them, and people might not like it, but that's what we see. We hope we're wrong. We're both cheering.
Well,
USA.
and you know what? Listen, and I'm not saying this to be. I'm not saying this in any way, but serious. Anybody that wants, I mean, this is pool. Anybody that wants can get on their practice table. And to get their Fargo rate up to 800 and get on the U.S. Mosconi Cup team and go lend a hand. So it's like, I'm serious. Like I'm not trying to get on the Mosconi Cup team, but I'm trying to get better and I'm trying to play my best. And so I'm not throwing stones at U.S., but I'm not throwing stones at the commentators that are calling it either, because it's like, if you don't like the state of U.S. pool, then go do a better job. And that's why I'm a player. That's why I'm a player, and I'm not like first. Just because I didn't just sit around when I was a kid and be like, well, he should have done this or he should have done that. I'm like, well, if you want it done right, you just got to do it yourself. And I'm not saying I'm an example of doing it right, but that's why that's it, man. It's like anybody can join the team if you get good enough. So yeah, lend a hand. We could use you.
So let's wrap this up with like one thing that we're looking for going into day 1. Mine is going to be the settling in of Corey Deuel and Chris Robinson. Corey Deuel is not a rookie. The dude has played, maybe 11 times. This maybe his 11th or 12th time. He's double digits for sure. But given the 1 week notification that he had, and it was a little longer than that because he actually knew before. But we won't get into that. But whatever. About a week to settle in when you haven't been hitting a lot of meaningful balls, you can't expect to get the call. I'm looking to see how he settles in. Where JJ puts him as far as the team event, I think is going to be a really influential thing. If he puts him last, he might be making the statement, well, I don't really have a lot of faith in you, Corey. Sorry, but that's just what it is. And if he puts him, first, it's like, hey, let's get out there. If maybe you're trying to force him to settle in. I think the right spot to put him in that is probably 4th, maybe 3rd, because you don't really probably want to have him on the hill. If it goes hill, I don't think you want to put him there. But I'm looking to see how Corey Deuel and Chris Robinson sets in. That's what I'm looking for in day 1. What are you looking for?
I think that's a good point. And I have a question about Corey in a second, but I think that a big deal is going to be Shane. I mean, when I was kind of talking about it, it just occurred to me that if Shane plays as well as he can play and wins all, if he's like Superman and wins all of his matches and plays his best pool and he's slaying the champions that Europe is throwing at him, then I think that just both in terms of scoreline and in terms of morale and positive energy, to see Shane, for the U.S. to see their best player beat up on all of Europe's players, psychologically and in terms of score means a lot. Whereas if he gets up there and starts wilting and getting beat up, then I'll put it this way. I don't think there's a path to U.S. victory that doesn't hinge on Shane playing phenomenal and winning the majority of his matches. And so that's what I'm going to be kind of watching to see, what position is Shane in when he comes up in his 5th round? Are we down 4-0? Are we 2-2? And then how does he handle the singles match, and how does he look, in terms of spirit?
Yep. I think that's great. So let's wrap this up. I was hoping to make this one a quick one. Didn't turn into a quick one.
Well, my question about Corey Deuel, why, like,
oh, yeah, of course.
Why? Like, why? Like, I mean, I love Corey Deuel, by the way. I'm not even saying I think he should have been on the team, even prior to this plague. But it's just strange. I mean, what do you think about, like, it just seems like, what is your thoughts on, like, it seems like the U.S. has a few great players that, and Corey's kind of one of them. But it just seems interesting to me that we end up with the teams we do. But I guess
you're going to be putting me in a really tough spot because I know the answer to this question and I can't talk about it.
All right.
I can tell you off air.
Yeah.
How's that? I'll tell you off air. How's that?
All right. Well, I'll just leave it with this. I'm a big Corey fan. I think that the difference between Corey and Chris is that Chris has a lot to prove, whereas Corey, I'm not saying he's showing up for a paycheck. I mean, he's a competitor, man. He's been given an opportunity to compete. But I will tell you that the disruption of Corey coming on the team at last minute, not just in terms of ability of play, because I don't really think there's that big of a loss going from Bergman to Corey in terms of playability. But it's just in terms of like, I mean, anytime you're getting ready to play a match and your roster gets jacked around like the week before, it's got to be a little bit like unnerving, you know? So anyway, it's just, but I'll tell you what, if the U.S. can pull this out, it's going to depend on Shane playing great and Chris playing great and them getting a lot of positive energy.
And Sky doing exactly what he's been doing.
What's that?
And Sky doing exactly what he's been doing the last few years.
Well, I think, but listen, if Shane and Chris do their part, Sky will do his part.
I think so. Yeah. Because he's just rock solid. Yep. So then maybe one last question. I promise. Better question than asking what we think the scoreline will be. What do we actually think the percentage chance that the U.S. pulls out this race to 11? Because we're just to be clear to the people that we're not hating on the U.S. Like we do understand, like the U.S. could win this, right? I mean, it's not like there's 0%. So what do you think the chances are of them winning? I think it is pretty close to 0 personally. And I do because of the coaching, right? I mean, the coaching is such a huge thing for me. For whatever you want to say about, well, at the end of the day, you're just a coach and you can't really affect the play on the table. And that's like saying Bill Belichick can't control the way that the Patriots play every single Sunday when we have 15 to 20 years or whatever track record saying otherwise. Coaching does make a huge difference, and I really, really do believe that Alex Lely has put his players in the best position possible, not only to succeed, but to keep their heads in the right place. And Johan, I know, did that for the U.S. because he came in having the U.S. had just lost 7 years in a row. He takes over the first year, makes them slightly competitive the first year, wins the second and the third year. Now he's out. I know that Johan put the U.S. in a position to win. We're going to see if JJ can do it too, but I know that Alex Lely is going to do it. So I really 0%. All right, fine. I won't do that. I would give him 5 to 10%, and that 5 to 10% is Shane has enough passion left in the tank to play Shane Poole. Chris Robinson comes out, takes the world by storm, and Sky does exactly what he's supposed to do as far as like what he's been doing the last 2 years. It takes all three of those variables plus a little bit of struggles out of maybe a Fedor or maybe an Atlanti or something like that. It takes a couple struggles on the other side with those three players playing great. That's what I think it takes for the U.S.
So I would say realistically, I think that they're around 15 to 20%. And the reason I say that is because if they're 15%, it's like if somebody offered me 5 to 1 of the money, I'd probably bet U.S. just because, I'd fire $100 to see if I could win 500. You know what I mean? I can see past the victory for the U.S. And you're right. They all involve Shane playing great and Chris coming out playing great. They involve, Europe stumbling a few times. But these are races to 5, and so we don't need Europe to miss 50 balls. We need them to miss 1 or 2 balls at the wrong time, and the U.S. to get some positive energy, and Chris to turn in a good set, and Shane to stay focused. And it's like, Corey breaks, he knows the break, and he can do his little Corey duel stuff, and it's like, I don't know, man. I think that there are paths to victory for USA. It's just I would say there are paths to victory for the U.S., but there's 5 variables, and they kind of all have to tip the U.S.'s way. And so it's like, if each one of them is 50-50, well, it's 2 to the 5th, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. So I could see if you want to make an argument for 5%, I could see it. But the difference is that it's not flipping a coin, that these variables are based on energy. And that as things start going good for U.S., and then, as Shane starts playing good and Chris gets pumped up and then everything starts going for the U.S., that's actually makes an influence on how Europe plays. So they're not independent coin flips. And these variables, they do all have to go with the U.S.'s way, but sometimes it's hard to stop a runaway train. And so I'll put it this way. I will close by saying I do think that they're about 15%. I think that they are underdogs, but they do have a path to victory, and it's all about energy, momentum, and just kind of transcending the odds, which, that happens every day in pool where people just do what needs to be done. And so we'll see if they can do it.
Yep. I think that's a good way of putting it, and I think it's a good way of closing out the podcast. Demetrius, thanks for joining me last second, kind of. Well, not even kind of. It was pretty last second. But I did want to get one of these out there so that we could be proven wrong like crazy, and everybody can say, "Ha, you guys are idiots," and we'll be like, "Yes, US won. I don't care."
Hey, I've acquired a taste for crow, so that's okay.
It tastes so sweet. All right, so I will be doing podcasts every single day after the Mosconi Cup. Tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I will be having some special guests joining me each of those days. People like Mike Howerton, Melina Mike, Joey Gray, Jay Garrison, Johnny Archer, Oscar Dominguez, Jim Telfer, Emily Frazier, Raleigh Williams, Lil Chris, Mark White, and a couple of other bigger people in the industry. We want to get some analysis of what happened. What are we looking for the next days? Blah, 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 blah. We're going to be a bunch of talking heads having a lot of fun just sitting around chatting. So those are going to be live on Facebook. Somewhere between 30 to an hour after each day. So if you guys want to jump on, check out what we're doing, what we're talking about, please do. Always look at the Cue It Up podcast page on Facebook. If you haven't liked and followed it yet, you're dead to me. Just kidding. But I base my happiness off how many likes and followers I have. So get over there and do it. And yeah, we're going to give lots of content out there for you guys, the fans, and it's Mosconi Cup week. Sit back, enjoy it. This is the first thing we've had to watch in months and months of COVID shutdown. So remember,
Man, they can take away our get-togethers, they can take away our pool tournaments, they can take away our health, but they can't take away the Mosconi Cup.
Exactly. Good way of putting it. So I remind you guys, sit back, relax, enjoy it, spread some cheer, make fun of some Europeans, all in good fun. Let's enjoy this. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. If you've liked what you've heard and you want to contribute to the future content that will be made, consider joining the podcast's Patreon at www.patreon.com/QItUp. Becoming a Patreon of the podcast will help to create all of the future content that the podcast will have. Special shout out to Dave Peters, Aaron Taylor, Pete Silsby, Morgan Lupton, Ben Young, Robert Miller, Andy Morse, and Bill Pelham for your generous contributions to the podcast's Patreon. If you ever need any more information on what the Patreon system is, or how you can contribute outside of the Patreon, please reach out to the podcast or Nate himself. If you would like to contribute to the podcast for free, consider sharing any podcasts or the podcast page on Facebook itself. Also, leaving a review and a rating if you listen through iTunes. It helps others find the podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the Cue It Up podcast.